Edgar Allan Poe was not just a writer, he was a master of the macabre, the architect of gothic horror, and the father of detective fiction. His poems and tales dripped with dread, sorrow, and beauty, captivating readers around the world. Yet behind his literary genius lay a fragile soul, burdened by poverty, alcoholism, and heartbreak. By October 1849, Poe's name was already etched into literary history. The Raven had made him a cultural sensation, but fame didn't bring fortune. His financial struggles were relentless, his relationships turbulent, and his health unstable. Then came the day that would change everything. On October 3, 1849, Poe was found delirious and incoherent in Baltimore, dressed in someone else's clothes, rambling in a daze. Within just 4 days, the great poet of darkness was dead. His final hours were shrouded in confusion and terror, and to this day, no one knows for sure what killed him. Was it alcohol, illness, political foul play, or something darker still? This is not just the story of Poe's death. It is the unraveling of a mystery that has haunted America for nearly 2 centuries. And as we dive deeper, the questions will only grow more chilling. Before his tragic end, Poe was already a legend. His works didn't just entertain. They pierced the human psyche, forcing readers to confront the shadows within themselves. The Telltale Heart explored madness with brutal intimacy. The Fall of the House of Usher painted a world of decay and doom. The Raven, perhaps his most famous work, became a cultural phenomenon, quoted and performed across the nation. Yet Poe's brilliance was met with resistance. Critics often dismissed him as too morbid, too unsettling, too radical for the literary world of his time. He struggled for recognition, often earning meager sums while his publishers profited from his genius. His personal life mirrored his stories, haunted by tragedy. He lost his young wife Virginia to tuberculosis, a death that shattered his heart. Financial ruin and depression followed him like shadows. But despite his pain, Poe's writing only deepened, channeling grief into haunting art. He became a voice for the broken, the lonely, the misunderstood. It's this very darkness, this tortured brilliance, that makes the mystery of his death all the more compelling. The timeline of Poe's last days is riddled with gaps and contradictions. On September 27, 1849, he left Richmond, Virginia, headed for Philadelphia. But he never arrived. Instead, 6 days later, he was discovered in Baltimore, outside a tavern that doubled as a polling place. Witnesses said he was nearly unconscious, unable to explain what had happened to him. Strangely, he was wearing cheap, ill-fitting clothes that were not his own. Taken to Washington College Hospital, Poe drifted in and out of delirium. He called out repeatedly for someone named Reynolds, though no one knows who this was. His condition worsened quickly. He was too weak to explain himself, too disoriented to reveal what had befallen him. By October 7th, Edgar Allan Poe, just 40 years old, was dead. His final words, as reported, were chilling, "Lord help my poor soul." The cause? Officially, congestion of the brain. But in truth, no one really knew. One of the most sinister theories surrounding Poe's death is the practice of cooping. In the 19th century, election fraud was rampant. Gangs would abduct men from the streets, drug them, disguise them in different clothes, and force them to vote multiple times at different polling locations. Poe was found outside a polling site on election day. His disheveled state and strange attire suddenly made sense under this theory. He may have been a victim of cooping, repeatedly beaten, drugged, and dragged from one voting site to another until his body gave out. It's a chilling possibility. If true, Poe didn't just die of illness or weakness. He was the casualty of political corruption, used and discarded by men who saw him as nothing more than a pawn in a crooked game. But was it the whole truth? Or just one piece of a puzzle far darker? Poe's struggles with alcohol were well known. He was not a heavy drinker by nature, but even small amounts could leave him incapacitated. Friends described him as hypersensitive to liquor, prone to violent illness after only a glass or two. Doctors at the time quickly blamed his death on drunkenness. Newspapers ran with the narrative of the drunken poet whose habits finally destroyed him. It was a story that fit neatly with his reputation and silenced further questioning. But those who knew Poe best argued otherwise. In his final years, Poe had joined a temperance movement and was trying desperately to stay sober. He had even given lectures denouncing alcohol. Could his death really have been from drinking? Or was alcohol just an easy scapegoat? Medical historians have long speculated that Poe's death may have been the result of undiagnosed illness. Some point to rabies, noting his symptoms of confusion, fever, and difficulty drinking water. Others suggest cholera, which was spreading in Baltimore at the time. Still others argue it may have been a neurological disorder or even a brain tumor. His erratic behavior, his hallucinations, his weakened state, each detail fits multiple medical possibilities. But without an autopsy, the truth was buried with him. And medicine alone may not hold all the answers. Poe's life was not without conflict. His sharp criticism of fellow writers earned him enemies in the literary world. His biting reviews made him feared and resented. Some believe foul play cannot be ruled out. Was Poe attacked, beaten, poisoned, eliminated by someone who wanted him silenced? The lack of records from his final days fuels suspicion. No hospital notes survive. No medical documentation remains. His death was quick, mysterious, and strangely underreported for a man of his fame. The possibility of murder lingers, a shadow over every other explanation. As Poe drifted in and out of delirium, he repeated one name, Reynolds. Who was this mysterious figure? Some speculate he referred to Jeremiah Reynolds, an explorer whose work Poe admired. Others believe Reynolds was connected to Baltimore's political scene, or perhaps even involved in the cooping scheme. The truth remains elusive. Was Reynolds a cry for help, a clue, or just the ramblings of a dying mind? This unanswered question haunts the mystery of his final hours. Poe's funeral was as tragic as his death. On October 8, 1849, only a handful of mourners gathered to bury him. Rain poured down as his body was placed in an unmarked grave. The writer who gave the world eternal stories of dread and beauty was laid to rest without honor, without grandeur, without the recognition he deserved. It wasn't until decades later that his remains were moved to a more fitting memorial, and only then did the world begin to truly mourn the loss of Edgar Allan Poe. But by then, the details of his death had grown colder, the evidence more distant. Strangely, it was Poe's mysterious death that elevated his legend. The circumstances of his end mirrored his writing, strange, haunting, unresolved. His enemies painted him as a drunkard, while his admirers defended his honor. Doctors argued, biographers speculated, historians debated. Each theory only deepened the mystery, and the lack of answers ensured that the story would never fade. Poe's death became not just a tragedy, but a riddle, a story that outlived him, securing his place not just as a master of horror fiction, but as the central figure in one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries. After Poe's death, one man took control of his public image, his literary rival, Rufus Wilmot Griswold. Griswold despised Poe. Their feud was bitter, filled with insults and betrayals. But when Poe died, Griswold moved quickly, writing a scathing obituary that painted Poe as a deranged drunk, a drug addict, and a man of loose morals. Shockingly, Griswold then posed as Poe's literary executor, without official permission, and began publishing collections of Poe's works, inserting lies into the biographies that accompanied them. He wanted to tarnish Poe's name forever. This smear campaign worked. For decades, readers accepted Griswold's portrait of Poe as truth, a brilliant but ruined man who drank himself to death. But was this more than defamation? Did Griswold, or another rival, have a hand in Poe's demise? The lines between slander and suspicion blur here. Because in crime, sometimes motive is the most powerful clue. Modern doctors have revisited Poe's symptoms with the benefit of today's knowledge. His delirium, his incoherence, his fluctuating pulse, his inability to explain his condition, all point toward possible causes. Some argue for rabies, as his refusal of water matched the disease's symptoms. Others cite epilepsy, known to cause sudden breakdowns. Still others suggest carbon monoxide poisoning, or even heavy metal toxicity. But none of these theories fully explain the strange clothing, the missing days, or his cries of Reynolds. Was Poe's death purely medical? Or was medicine simply a mask hiding something sinister? When we strip away the diseases and diagnoses, one truth remains. Poe's end was not ordinary. One of the greatest gaps in Poe's story lies in the days between September 27th and October 3rd, 1849. 6 days, completely unaccounted for. He left Richmond healthy enough to travel. He was expected in Philadelphia for editing work. But somewhere along the way, he vanished. Was he abducted? Was he wandering in a drunken or feverish haze? Did he fall into the hands of cooping gangs? Or did something far darker occur? Those missing 6 days remain the black hole of Poe's mystery. If they could be recovered, the riddle of his death might finally be solved. But without them, we are left only with shadows. The cooping theory isn't just a rumor. It's tied to Baltimore's violent political scene. Election day in 1849 was chaotic. Voter fraud ran rampant, gangs patrolled the streets, and innocent men were often swept into schemes of corruption. Poe's location, his condition, and his clothing all fit the profile of a cooping victim. Witnesses described other men found the same way, beaten, drugged, forced to vote. If true, Poe wasn't just unlucky. He was another casualty of America's brutal early democracy. And yet, no official record confirms this. No one was ever held accountable. Political corruption may have swallowed the truth, leaving only whispers behind. Beyond theories of murder and illness lies another layer of post-tragedy, the death of his wife, Virginia. She died of tuberculosis at just 24. Poe adored her. Her loss shattered him emotionally, mentally, and physically. In the years after, his letters and poems reveal a man spiraling between grief and despair. Some historians argue Poe's death was not caused by poison or politics, but by a broken heart, compounded by years of depression, addiction, and loss. But could grief alone destroy a man so violently, leaving him delirious and lost on the streets of Baltimore? Or was Virginia's death only the prelude to a darker ending? Little is known about the care Poe received in his final days. Records of his treatment at Washington College Hospital are lost, or were never kept. The attending physician, Dr. John J. Moran, later gave conflicting accounts of Poe's condition. In one version, he blamed alcoholism. In another, he described Poe as sober but feverish. Each time he retold the story, the details changed. Why would a doctor alter his testimony? Was it poor memory, or something more deliberate? Without those records, we cannot know if Poe was poisoned, drugged, or suffering from natural illness. The very man tasked with healing him may have hidden, or lost, the evidence forever. In the 1870s, Poe's remains were moved to a grander memorial site. But during the exhumation, workers noticed something strange. Poe's skull contained a loose mass that rattled when shaken. Some claimed it was a brain tumor, hardened over time. Others believed it could be evidence of foul play, perhaps poisoning or trauma. Modern forensic science could solve this puzzle, but Poe's remains have never been fully tested. His bones, fragile with time, still hold secrets that no one has dared unlock. Was the answer buried with him? After Griswold's smear campaign, Poe's reputation as a mad, drunken genius became legend. For decades, the public dismissed the mystery of his death as the natural end of a troubled man. But this myth robbed Poe of justice. If his death was foul play, society turned away from the truth, choosing instead to believe the convenient narrative of self-destruction. Even today, debates rage. Was Poe a victim of his own demons, or of something darker? The myth of madness is powerful, but myths often hide reality. Nearly 2 centuries later, we are left with fragments, rumors of cooping, whispers of murder, theories of illness, and shadows of conspiracy. No autopsy was performed. No medical notes survive. The clothing he wore was not his own. His last words remain cryptic, and the days before his death are missing from history. This is why Poe's death endures, not as an answer, but as a riddle. The mystery itself has become part of his legend, as haunting as the tales he wrote. And like his stories, it may never truly be solved. Poe's death mirrors his work, tragic, chilling, unresolved. The man who gave us stories of premature burial, of madness, of mysterious crimes, lived his final hours as if trapped in one of his own tales. Was he poisoned, beaten, driven to delirium by illness, or swept into a web of political corruption? We may never know. But what we do know is this: Poe's life and death continue to fascinate because they touch on the deepest human fears: loss, madness, injustice, and the unknown. As you reflect on Poe's mysterious end, remember this: the truth may be lost, but the questions remain alive. And sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be told again and again, like an echo in the dark. The mystery of Edgar Allan Poe is not just history. It is legend. It is crime. And it is eternal.